Our next speaker, I'm proud to say, has served our country well in the armed forces, been overseas on several different situations, missions, and he'll be coming up to share his story. Also a former intelligence officer. So why don't we put a warm, hearty soldier welcome together for our dear friend Nicholas Thomas, guys.
This is my first time giving my testimony, so I have written things down. Hopefully it goes the way that I want it to, but in asking my wife for some help, she texted me this morning while I was here and said that God put Proverbs 3, verse 5 and 6 in her heart. It says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him and he will make your path straight." And it's so true with what I'm about to try to share with you. Yeah, we'll just go from that. So I just want to start it off as kind of a movie where I just give you where I am right now. So a typical week for me, I'm a basketball coach. I coach 11-year-olds in competitive basketball on Mondays and Fridays. On Tuesdays, I normally attend Life Center for Bible school. On Wednesdays, my wife goes to women's group, so I'm at home with my 3 children. Thursdays is our family time where we try to pour into each other, pour into our family. And on the weekends, as a business owner, we both have responsibilities. Sundays, we give it to the Lord, and we try to attend church regularly. Now the lights go off, and I bring you to Nicholas, a child. I grew up in Sudbury. I grew up to immigrant parents. They moved here from Jamaica in the mid-'70s. My father had a grade 7 education and was adamant that I continue school. Unfortunately, while I was in college, I knew that accounting wasn't something that I wanted to do. I was very active as a child. I played basketball, volleyball. I wrestled through high school, and I just didn't want to be sitting at a desk. I prayed and prayed and prayed for about 6 months and went home from school, went up to Sudbury, told my parents my decision, and needless to say, they weren't happy about it. I remember telling my mother that I would get my degree. I would do it for her, but this is something that I needed to do because I just wasn't ready to do what I was studying. So I enlisted. My first day of military service was April 1st, 2000, and I joined as a combat engineer. So I dealt with improvised explosive devices, IEDs, mines, booby traps, bridging, things like that. But when 9/11 happened, it really changed the course of my life in ways that I couldn't have imagined. For the next 3 years, was either training for war or experiencing war. During that time, 2003, 2004, I went off to Roto Zero, the first official roto to Afghanistan and Kabul with my brother Roger over there. You can see our picture over there on the table. During that time, my section, as a kind of a quick reaction force, responded to the first 2 IED attacks that resulted in deaths. I came back and applied for the trade of intelligence, which is something that I originally applied for but realized I couldn't do it as a civilian off the street. So with my first opportunity, I applied, and about 6 months later, heard nothing back and had given up. My unit asked me if I wanted to go back on rotation number 3. I said yes, and was walking out the door, getting ready to go what we call pre-deployment leave. So I was walking to my car, a soldier approached me and said, "Somebody wants you inside." As I went into the office, through the fax machine was coming my acceptance letter into the trade of intelligence. Needless to say, that tour faced a lot of death in my own section that I probably would have been in my own unit. So it was just an example of how God was shifting me in a certain direction. So now I'm learning new skills. I'm learning skills that make it more difficult for me to communicate with my family and my friends. It's making them more difficult for them to ask me questions, knowing what I'm comfortable and not comfortable answering. And, same with my parents. And so it got to a point where I was just happy being around them and vice versa. And we didn't speak about the elephant in the room. So I go off to Kandahar, and I go as an intelligence operator, as a counter IED operator, which means that I'm targeting all of the bad guys that are doing anything to do with improvised explosive devices, whether they're making them, they're training other people, or they're emplacing them. Worked really hard. I got a CDS commendation, the highest commendation you can get in the Canadian Forces. But while I was there, some of the work that I was doing was going overlooked and unnoticed because of situations that were beyond my control. But nonetheless, I developed a lot of anger towards one particular person for what I felt was his responsible part in many deaths, many of which were my friends. And I thought I had dealt with that, but I really didn't. I didn't have time to process it because while I was there, I was selected to go on an embassy posting, which is something that I wanted to do within the trade. And so I came back home after my tour. I went on a year-long Arabic training, and then I went to Syria. And when I got there, it was beautiful. It was nice. I loved it. I started my degree in psychology. But about 10 months into my tour, or into my posting, actually on my birthday, it was the second day of protests, and my ambassador asked myself and some other people to go out and observe the protest to see if embassy staff could get home safely. And during that time, I was apprehended by a plainclothes officer. So it's, as you can imagine, there was fights, scuffles, so on. Eventually got put into the back of the car, blindfolded, punched, beaten, brought to the head of strategic intelligence, and basically interrogated for the course of the day before he realized that I was actually Canadian and I was actually a diplomat and I wasn't African and I wasn't here to incite the Arab Spring. April 8th, so my birthday is March 16th, so now less than a month later, I am asked by Ottawa to do a reconnaissance of all the airfields in Syria. So I travel basically the distance from here to Toronto to North Bay, and then back to Ottawa, which would bring me from Damascus to Latakia to Aleppo and back down to Damascus. While I was driving back on my final leg, I struck a child on the highway. It was the version of the 401 along Kingston with a ditch in the center. What I came to learn is the boy ran across the highway to get a ball, and when he was returning, just made a poor decision, and I struck him. But the pain and the guilt and the shame that I felt because of that, the screams that I heard when his parents found out that their child had died, pierced me to no end. Didn't have time to process that either. When I came back, people were patting me on the back, telling me I did a good job. They wanted to send me out. I'd always been successful in the military. I was the top candidate on my basic training course and on the next course, and I was good at what I did, and now they wanted to give me more. And I wanted to be out. I wanted to explore the world. It was what I wanted to do since a child. I wanted to help people, and I wanted to explore the world. So while I was back and waiting for the next rotation to go out, I met my now wife. So I met, a nice Christian woman, and we dated for several months while I waited for my visa, and then I took off. And we continued dating. I proposed to her about a year later, and we eventually got married when I returned. But while I was there, I was able to finish my degree. But to do that, I started to get a dog walker for my German Shepherd, and I got a gardener for the stuff that I was working on the garden. I got a cook to cook for me, and I got a maid to clean my house. And so I was only going to work. I was playing basketball. I was playing some music sometimes at different embassy events, and I was studying. But it made me selfish, and I wasn't aware of what was happening to me. When I came back in 2015, I was faced with a reality of now a second child who didn't know me because he was born 6 months before I returned. So I came home for the birth for 2 weeks, went back for the final 6 months, and came back to a child who was screaming, and I didn't know how to turn off that tap. My wife didn't understand me. She talked too much. She wanted too much from me, and I expected her to do everything. I expected her to wash my dishes. I expected her to wash my clothes. I expected her to cook, even though it's something that I love to do, because I was so used to everybody tending to my needs. And so without being able to control my environment, without being able to quiet my son, without being able to quiet my wife, putting my oldest son second before myself, I was just leaving the house for hours on end, sometimes overnight, sometimes a whole weekend. I was in really rough shape. I just didn't know how to control anything, and my way to control my environment was to dig. But I didn't realize that I was digging downward. I was digging away from my family. I was digging away from my friends. I didn't have any friends in Ottawa. Most of my friends were in Toronto, and I just felt isolated and alone, and I was just furthering that isolation. So it got to a point where I was going to work late and I was coming back early, and when that hit me about 6 months after I returned, I just felt worthless, because the one thing that I was good at, the one thing that I knew how to do well, I was now not able to do. And so I would do the bare minimum. I'd go to work, I'd come home, and I'd shut the drapes, and I'd just sleep or just sit in my room in darkness. And it was at that point that I decided to go to mental health at Montfort Hospital. And after my diagnosis of major depression and PTSD, I started to see a psychologist. And for about 2 months, it was relatively blah. Nothing was really changing. And so this one afternoon, I came home, and something just came over me, and I was like a frog on the ground with these big snot bubbles, and I was just crying and uncontrollable. I might have peed a little bit. I just couldn't control myself, and I just, at that point, hit the lowest point. So I remember, Pastor Mike, you were just saying, what do we need? We need to cry out to God, and that's exactly what I did. I cried out, and I was asking him, why, God, why? I knew that I wanted to help people. I knew that I wanted to study psychology, but why did you wait 15 years into the military to allow me to study this? Why couldn't I have done this as a 19-year-old and have been working and had my own practice or doing something that I love without having to go through all of this? Why do I have to feel this? Why did you use me as the literal vehicle to kill this boy? Why are you putting me through all of this? I can't do this on my own anymore. I just can't do it. So you have to take the wheel. You have to do something, because I'm starting to believe that you don't exist. And this was my challenge to him. And in hindsight, I look back, and I just felt God going, thank you for crying out to me. I've been waiting for you to talk to me. I've been waiting and waiting and waiting. And it was at that point that things started to change, slowly. 2 steps forward, but 1 backwards. It wasn't a straight line at all. At that point, the emotional valve started opening up. Honestly, I thought I would have been crying by now, so this is a win for me. But the emotional valve opened up, and things that I would have never felt, commercials, anything stupid, but also serious things, tears would just start flowing down, and I didn't understand why, and I was ashamed, and I was embarrassed. And so while I was starting to go back to church slowly, as my wife was begging me over the last few years to go to church, and I refused. I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. I don't want to give tithes. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. I started to slowly go, maybe once a month, then once every 2 weeks. And then I said, I'm just isolated. I just feel alone. I want Christian men around me. And so as I started going to this psychologist, I felt really all it was doing for me was giving me a legal paper for me to go to my work and say, I'm sick, I don't have to go to work. But as soldiers in the room, we know we're like on the best sports team ever. And being broken is just not an option for us. We don't want to be on the sidelines. We want to be in the game. So whether it's a broken leg or a broken mind, we want to be included. And it was hard for me to feel like I wasn't part of the team. It was hard for me to feel like my team was looking down on me like I was broken and I was worthless. So I made the decision to start the release process. And so they have a unit called the JPSU. It's called the Joint Personnel Support Unit. And so I went there to meet the person that would be taking care of me. And when they let me through the doors, I walked through, and the first face that I saw was Brother Rogers. After not having seen him in about 14 years, after our tour together where we played dominoes incessantly every night just to keep sane, I see him. It's the first face that I see welcoming me, and it was God saying, your mission is over. It's time for debriefing. You prayed, and I've opened the doors for you to become a soldier and to learn the things that I need you to learn, even though you don't know what they are yet. But now I'm showing you. I'm giving you what you need, Doubting Thomas, because I am a Doubting Thomas. And I need to see it, I need to see it, I need to see it, I need the signs, I need the physical. And that, for me, was just a calming effect for me to accept where I was in life and that God was allowing me to move forward. So a couple of months go by, and I started attending church a little bit more regularly, and I meet Sean. Where are you? Sean. I meet Sean at church, and God knows how to reach me as a soldier, so he puts on Sean's heart to invite me to paintball. Of course I'm going to say yes. I go to paintball, and I meet Doug, Nate. I meet a bunch of guys that I eventually start to feel more comfortable around men. And then all of a sudden I realize, hey, 1, 2, 3, I'm starting to get Christian friends. He's answering another prayer. It's great. And it's slowly inspiring me to take a look at my situation, to stop pointing the finger at my wife and blaming her for saying this when she shouldn't have said that, doing this when she shouldn't have did that, leaving this here, and if only she would stop triggering me, then everything would be fine. But the reality is I'm triggered by everything, and everybody has to stand still in order for me to feel like I'm half a human being. And it was terrible, and I was tearing my house apart. So I started to attend Rogers men's groups every last Saturday of the month. I started to attend the Wolf Pack. And while I was at the Wolf Pack, one of the gentlemen, young, I was just going through something that day and just complaining about feeling so angry and having to leave the house. And he said, you can't do that. You can't do that as a leader of your house, as the father, as the husband. You have to stay in your house. Even if you go to another room, you have to work it out. You have to stay in your house. And it's something that's always stayed with me. But all that said, that God has answered so many of my questions, and some he hasn't answered, but I feel blessed to be where I am now, looking back even 3 years. Now I'm in my first year of studying psychotherapy, and through that, I've learned that helping people involves acknowledging my own feelings. Helping them feel involves also acknowledging that I have feelings as well. And God brought me through so many experiences to show me and bring me to that place so that I could be the best professional helper that I could be. In the last year at Life Center, 3 separate people who don't know me, who don't know that I'm studying, have just walked up to me and said, I see you standing in front of people, and people's just listening intently at you. My wife has said it to me, and I've dreamt it. And here I am for the first time talking, and I never thought that I would be this calm in front of you. And it's a miracle. Sean asked me if I could help serve with Share-a-thon at CHRI, and I spoke to Diane, and she came to see me, and we met, and I was talking to her, and I was just talking about my life a little bit, and started feeling emotional, and then I started talking about my inability to control my emotions, my tears. I get so empathetic that it just comes out, and I feel embarrassed. And she said, no, these are tears that God collects, and he keeps them. And so I went home, and I was going through scriptures, and I just feel it necessary as men who find it very difficult to cry even by ourselves, let alone with other people, that we hear these scriptures. So in Matthew 10:29, it says, not one sparrow falls to the ground apart from God's notice, and neither does one of your tears. 1 Samuel chapter 1, verses 10 and 17, when Hannah wept bitterly outside the temple, God noticed and remembered. And then in Psalm 6:6-9, when David became weary in moaning, God didn't become weary with listening. And finally, the God of all comfort keeps watch over your weeping. He gathers up all your tears and puts them in his bottle, Psalms 56:8. And like a mother sitting beside her child's sickbed, God marks every sigh and discomfort and pain. No matter how much you anguish, Your anguish has gone unnoticed by others. Not one moment has escaped the attention of the God who neither slumbers nor sleeps. Psalms 121, verse 4. And this is something that took me a long time to really come to terms with and come to accept, that my empathy and my pain and my grief needs to come out. I need to feel it. I need to acknowledge it. Otherwise, I'm going to start going in the wrong direction. And God has given me the opportunity to see so much and to help so many people, that I feel blessed to be standing here now, because at the point where I decided to go to mental health is the point where people decide to take their lives. It's the Y junction in the road where I am physically about to make a decision to do something. And it's only because I grew up going to church and I had God in my heart. As distant as I pushed him away, as far as I pushed him away for 18 years, he was still there, and he was the one that said, go in this direction. Lie down and cry out to me so I can prove who I am. And if it wasn't for that, I'd be in a box in the ground. 5 weeks ago, my roommate in Petawawa just committed suicide. And I can't count on one hand how many of my friends, people I know, that have taken their lives because they were unable to speak to someone. They were unable to feel God's love and strength. And it inspires me to help people. And he says, I feel him saying to me that your experience as a soldier can help other soldiers. Your experience can, as a soldier, is like no other bond that you have. And so when somebody sits in front of you or sits beside you and is talking, they understand that you know what they're talking about. They don't know buzzwords and things out of books, but you've been there, you've felt it, and this is what I'm empowering you to take with you. So all of those experiences are for my edification. And just knowing that is giving me the strength to know that I don't know what's around the corner, but I know that God has something for me and I'm worth something. Over? Okay. So in saying that, I just want to thank everybody for taking time to listen to my story. I know that I've glossed over a lot of things in the respect for time, but we have a panel, so if you see me, feel free to ask me any questions, and I just hope that although it's outside of my understanding, that what I've said has reached someone in some way. So I just want to thank you all, and God bless.
Thank you, brother. And don't go away. Just stay up here. Yeah.
So this morning, or yesterday, I asked my wife to just write something about where she saw me at my worst and where she sees me today. And she wrote something and gave it to me. I didn't look at it yet. It just says then and now. And oh gosh. So then I was focused on self. Shame, hiding, despair, hopelessness, dark, cloudy, anger, absent husband, father, although physically present, unfaithful, unreliable, distant, impatient, ticking time bomb, contempt, always blaming, unwilling, not motivated, no trust, lethargic, always focused inward and on self. So we're pretty close to the mark on that one. And now she says, I'm focused on Jesus. I've had release and freedom, joy. The sparkle is back in my eye. More peace, light, hopeful, present and active husband and father, involved, loving, kind, helpful, faithful, respectful, patient, motivated, trusting, outwardly focused, compassionate. You get up when you stumble, accountable and owns behavior, and he's willing, a man to be proud of. And so this answered a lot of my wife's prayers as well, so I'm grateful for that, because I know that she's had her arguments with the Lord over me, and she's much more proud of where I am today. So I thank God for my wife. And so all of us, let's give a big hand for our beautiful wives. I know it's a men's conference, but let's give it up to them. Thank you.
Don't go anywhere. And all you men that are married and to be married, you all deserve a now and then letter, a then and now letter, and only through God's redemption. I would just as you were sharing, brother, I just felt God really just impressing on me that He Thomas was doubting, but he used him for great works through his faith. And so I just feel like today is a catalyst moment for you, that this is the beginning of everything he has prepared you for. And it not only hurt you to go through those circumstances, to have to witness what the enemy did and lied to you in to try and take you out, but it was painful for your Heavenly Father to have to watch you go through them too, to become the man that he's calling you to be, to use you in the circumstances in the dark corners of life to redeem others. So I just want to pray for you, and I want, if everybody could just feel comfortable, stretch out their hands, and just, Lord, you say that you're going to renew our minds, Lord. Renew our minds, Lord. They triumphed over him by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. They did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death. Another translation says, they have defeated him by the blood of the Lamb and by their testimony. And yet another one says, and they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. And Nicholas, as you shared your testimony today, God, we just know that the Lord has triumphed over the enemy. And he's continued to, and he's given you the strength that you needed. Let your mind be renewed. 2 Timothy says, you have not been given a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and a sound mind. And in this moment, your mind is being renewed. There's been a spiritual exchange. The old doubting Thomas has been set to death. And the new Nicholas has risen up. And Lord, we just pray that you would equip him and impart him and use him. Lord, not with the C7, but the word of the Lamb. God, may he set the captives free, God. We just pray that today, moving forward, his life would never be the same again. That when he goes in his home today and his wife sees him this evening, Lord, she would just know the shift that happened, that the mighty warrior has risen to the occasion. She has seen the subtle changes, Lord, but there has been a huge shift in his heart, God. We thank you. Use him, send him, and let us all learn from him today, Lord. There's a cost to war, a cost when men around us are dying physically, or they're living a life of death, focused on a world that is dying. Lord, may we be encouraged and empowered to fight your battle for the world to come. In your name, Jesus, we pray over him. Amen.